Good evening, everyone. So, not a traditional damage report tonight. I think that there's not really a ton to dissect from that game. However, I do think that with the impending return of Jacob Slavin, you have to start talking about what is going to happen as far as with the roster of the team. And you've got two big question marks there. One, you can't keep all your defensemen. So, what I'm imagining is going to happen there is since Nystrom does not have to worry about clearing waivers, he'll get assigned and Riley will still be the seventh guy. Slavin comes back in, and that's as normal there. The bigger question mark right now is the goaltending. Brandon Bussi has played himself into a position because he would be on waivers. He can't be sent down without it. In the event that does happen, that has to be taken into consideration that if you put Brandon Bussi on waivers, he will get claimed. There is no way that he won't. Even if he just went to a team that wanted more goaltending depth and they, needed a backup to somebody who's more of a serviceable starter than what Carolina's recent circumstances have been. But I am legitimately convinced if Brandon Bussi goes on waivers, he will be claimed. So I think that the front office has basically got to cross that idea off the list. It would be one of the most Carolina Hurricanes things ever if the answer to the problems in net were solved by a goalie claimed off of waivers after waiving another goalie who was claimed off of waivers and then got claimed and came back. So he can't go. He cannot be waived because or he can't be assigned to the minors because he has to go through waivers. He will get claimed. So this is where I think that having a difficult discussion is kind of imminent. The team's getting healthy now. KK's back. Slavin will soon be back. There's discussions to be had. So it's, as the kids say, a good problem to have. But I think that after his performances lately, but particularly tonight, here's the biggest thing. What the Canes have been missing as far as between the pipes, they can usually limit the shots. They limit shot quality. They don't give up many high danger chances, but the ones that they do are very high quality, high danger chances. Like if you could put high danger chances on a spectrum, the ones the Canes eventually do give up because teams have to work for them are the best ones you're going to see. What they've been missing in a lot of cases, and one of the prime examples of this was Game 6 when the Rangers eliminated the Canes a couple of seasons ago in the playoffs, was you needed 2 timely saves. Or you could even say one so the game doesn't get tied to begin with and the momentum going back the other way. Either way, you needed a couple of timely saves from Freddie Anderson in Game 6, and you're going to MSG for Game 7. That didn't happen. There's been a lot of times where the Hurricanes played their game, which is asymmetric to how a lot of the league, especially their better teams, execute their game plans. Limit the shots, limit the shot quality, limit the chance quality. We saw it the other night when they played against Toronto. Even though that was a, kind of a lackluster effort, they limited a lot of those chances, but ultimately Toronto capitalized as much as they needed to and then some. What they need more than anything is goaltending that can make timely saves after sitting there cold for a long time. Kochetkov does that occasionally. But as we saw with Kochetkov's first game this season, when he faced a higher amount of shots than normal, he's one of those goalies that I think just does better when he stays busy. He's one of those guys that can't sit there and be left alone with his own thoughts for too long. Otherwise, that's when his game ends up not working in his favor. Bussi, on the other hand, didn't have to make a ton of saves tonight. He didn't have to make a high amount of saves. It wasn't a high volume of saves he had to make, but he made very, very quality saves. And out of the 3 goals that he did let in, 2 of them I would say are not on him. At a minimum, I would say 1 was not on him, and 1 of them was kind of 50-50 between him and the defense both. So it's Brigham, I'm going to get to that actually. That's something I wanted to talk about, but very, very happy you brought that up. So I'm doing my best to pump the brakes right now because this is kind of a delicate situation. It doesn't look like a delicate situation after the performance we saw tonight. You know, I was joking about sending Freddie to China. I don't actually want to do that. I would hate to see Carolina win a cup without Freddie, even if he were backing up. But kind of in that position now. And this team has already shown, even though that was in the Waddell days, near the end of them anyway, that they'll waive a goalie near Christmas time. They did it with Ronta. So that's not out of the realm of possibilities. But the thing about it is, Bussi made timely saves tonight. He made highly athletic saves. He gets a little out of position with his anticipation at times, but he's big and he can move quickly, makes up for it and everything in a lot of ways for it. And that's what you need. Sometimes you need your goalie to bail you out, and occasionally your goalie needs to bail himself out. And Bussi did that on almost every occasion you could have asked for him tonight. But the reason I'm saying pump the brakes is because there's been plenty of times throughout the history of the game, the history of the Hurricanes specifically, that you see a goalie or even a guy who skates out, has a stretch of really, really good performances. People start to overvalue how good they actually are, and then they're surprised when they regress to the mean, you could say. Another example of this, you have players who are, you know, NHL standard, not particularly amazing in any way during the regular season. And then they go to the postseason and they turn into an absolute animal, i.e. Sam Bennett's a good example of that. If you want a goaltending example of that, Matt Murray with the Penguins. So there's a bunch of different ways that can happen. So I'm actually glad that Brigham here sent this up or brought this up. Do you think Bussi catching right throws guys off? I hope he can keep this going and doesn't get figured out. That could potentially have something to do with it. The reason why I say that is, and I'm going to look at the numbers on this, Washington for a stretch last season, and it may have been at the end of the season statistically as well, had, I believe, the highest combined save percentage and the lowest goals against average and the highest goal save above expected for their tandem. Last season, there were only 2 full right goalies, which is what you're referring to when someone catches right. That's also referred to as full right. There were 2 full right goalies in the league last year, and Washington had them both. Logan Thompson and Lindgren. So I wonder if that's a factor, considering the overwhelming majority of the goalies in the league have their blocker on the right hand and catch with their left. So that's what they get acclimated to. That's what they get used to. They're shooting it on guys at practice who block with the right, catch with the left. They play games against guys who block with the right, catch with the left. And that's even more uniform now since, as my friend Steve, who is a goalie, him and I have played together, says that it almost seems like goalies have developed like this standard style of things. You have outliers occasionally, like Kochekov. Maybe you could throw Bennington in there, that kind of come outside of that. But he says that goalies are kind of relegated to they all kind of look the same, essentially, is what he said. And I have to agree with him on that. You don't have guys who really, really stand out in ways. Like, you could sit there and pick apart differences between Marty Turco, Martin Brodeur, Patrick Waugh, so on and so forth, Dominic Hasek, so on and so forth. You go into this day and age, it's kind of hard at times to tell goalies apart and really, really pick apart the differences between them. So I see what he's saying, that they all kind of seem to come out of the goalie factory, regardless, whichever one they come out of, kind of the same. So that's also a factor. But yeah, we're going to pull some stuff up here and take a look at this, because I am really, really curious All right, so I'm going to go back to last season first. And I want to look specifically at the Washington Capitals. All right, let me get this pulled up here. All right, 1 second, guys. All right, let me see. I'm going to find this here. All right. I wanted to set up. I basically use my phone as a second screen to make sure I stay on track with stuff here. Okay. I could just use my laptop for that, but I'm too lazy to get it out. All right. So here's what we're going to look at primarily with this. Like I said, you had two full right goalies in the NHL last year, and both of them played for Washington. So this is actually something pretty indicative to look at if Bussi, being a full right goalie himself, maybe has some impact on this. And it would make rational sense for it too, because the vast majority of the goalies in the league and in the world for that matter catch with their left hand. That's what players get accustomed to practicing against, playing against, so on and so forth. Then, suddenly blockers on a different hand, gloves on a different hand, and then, that kind of mixes things up a lot, throws them for a loop a little bit. So let's see what we have here. All right, so Logan Thompson played 43 games, had 26 goals saved above expected, which is really damn good. Logan Thompson was someone at one point in time I wanted the Hurricanes to go get. Charlie Lindgren played 39 games, 104 goals against, so they're not all too dissimilar there. 5-game difference, 1 goal against difference. Expected goals against, 130.96, 103.03, so they were pretty close in regards of being to where they needed to be expected wise. Lindgren was 1 under. That's not that big of a deal. Logan Thompson, 26 over. That's really good. Goal saved above expected per 60. So Logan Thompson was shutting down 0.615 per start and per game and everything like that. What I really want to look at here, here we go. Let me get back here. All right. So going to the more basic numbers here. Goals against average, expected goals against average, 2.49 to 3.10 for Logan Thompson, 2.73, 2.70 for them. Wins above replacement, blah, blah. Okay, I didn't really worry about all that. All right, now where I want to see is, all right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write down the most important numbers here, and then we'll compare it to what Bussi's got. So we'll do Thompson. Hopefully this pen doesn't quit, because I've had pens quit on me 5 times. See, this is something I could put slides together for, but this is just a little informal thing, so we can just do it like this. So 43 games. All right, so 43 games played, 39 games played. 26.0 and negative 1.0 GSAX. Per 60, we'll write that one down too, because that's important considering the volume of how much each of these guys played when compared to Bussi, because he's on track to play a closer amount of games to Charlie Lindgren than Logan Thompson. All right, so we'll do goals against average. That's a good one. 0.91 and 0.895 that's not what I meant to write down. 2.49, 2.73. Both of those are actually really excellent numbers. Goals against, we already looked at that. Saves on shots on goal. All right, here's what I want to look at. High danger, save percentage above expected. 0.118, 0.024. All right, so what we're going to do here, now that we've done that, let's go back to all teams. And this is from last season, clearly, and we can compare it to this one as well. So last season, let's bump it up to greater than, we'll go 25 games. So in the top, so Logan Thompson's in number 3 there. And so the next thing we want to find here is how far down the list that Charlie Lindgren is. So he's 35th overall. Oh, wait, nope, that's what we want to look at here. Okay, there we go. All right, so he's 3rd and 26. Let's go back and make sure that's still the same here. Yeah, and Charlie Lindgren's in 35th, and he's one of the few goalies that's actually below a goal saved, or he's barely below goal saved above expected. So that's not bad. So we've got those numbers here. So they rank 3rd and 35th. Interesting. Okay. So now that we've got that, we are going to go back to this season. All right, same thing here. Goal saved above expected. Let's see, how many games has Charlie Lindgren started this year? Okay, so he's played 10 games this year. So let's go back here, bump it up to 10. So goal saved above expected. All right. So this year, same thing. We've got Logan Thompson sitting at 19.7. And let's go to see how far down the list and Charlie Lindgren sitting in 20th. And he's sitting at 6.7. So both of them are in the good in that regard. Now, what we want to see next, I have to bump the games played down to find Bussi. Okay, so he's played 8. So amongst goalies with 8 games played or 8 games played or greater, Bussi is currently sitting in 28th. And goals saved above expected, he is sitting at 5.4, which is a little bit below Logan Thompson, but Thompson's also played a lot more games. But so if Bussi ranks 28th there, Thompson ranks 1st, and then let's see where Lindgren's at on this. Lindgren ranks 20th. So out of all the goalies in the league, the only 3 that catch with their left hand or with their right hand rank in the top 30. If all 3 of those guys were in the top 32, that would be pretty telling because there's 32 teams in the league, if you catch my math there. Let me go back over here to the stream for a minute. Okay. All right, let's go through some of the comments here, and then we'll talk some more about this because this is interesting stuff to look at here because I think that there is some sort of correlation there as far as, full right goalies kind of having a little bit of a strange mathematical advantage just because they're so much different than the industry standard, what, players are playing against conventionally. Lackey, what's up, buddy? What's up, y'all? Just got home from the game. Awesome, dude. I'm glad you had a good time. Same energy tomorrow, despite the back-to-back. Hopefully, I agree. I think they'll be all right. I'm going to talk a little bit about the game tomorrow. Also love the abundance of Bussi chats tonight. He's being loved for sure. Yeah, because us as fans, we need him more than he needs us to some degree. But it is nice to see everybody like really throwing their support behind him and everything like that, because he had to really claw his way to get to the NHL. But the Hurricanes also really need him after the start he's had. You got to keep him. Yeah, you cannot risk sending him down to the minors. He will get claimed. He has to go through waivers. He will get claimed. I just hope he isn't the next Spencer Martin. I don't think he is. Spencer Martin did not show the promise over any stretch of time. Like, don't get me wrong, that shutout he had against Ottawa, I got to be there for that game. That was great. But I didn't see a performance out of Spencer Martin that turned around and led to another great performance and another great performance and another great performance. And that's what the Hurricanes have had with Bussi for the most part. He's been relatively consistent in his 8 starts. Like he says, definition of being a diamond in the rough, and especially with how Freddie has been and how MIA Kochekov has been with injuries. Yeah, that's a good thing that's a good point to make there. Dylan, what's up, dude? You can see Tulsky standing behind the 3 stars in deep thought, probably about what he will do with Bussi. Yeah, he's got a decision to make. And the thing about it is, whatever decision he makes regarding Bussi is going to affect the other 2 goalies. So, I mean, it's a tough spot, because the thing is, it's a difficult position with Freddie, because we've seen him go through this before. 22-23, he had a really bad rough stretch. And I remember thinking, I was at the Stadium Series game, and that was the first game that I hadn't been to a hockey game in 2 years until the home opener that year. And then I hadn't been to another hockey game until the Stadium Series game. And then the next game I went to after that was no fun, because that's the one where Svechnikov tore his ACL. And then I didn't go to another game until Game 5 against the Devils. And that was one of the best games I've ever been to. The 2 best hockey games I've ever been to were that year. And I've been to many hockey games in my life, between the NHL, the SPHL. I've been to literally hundreds of hockey games. And those 2 were by far the best ones I've ever been to. But Freddie's gone through stretches like this and been able to come out of them. But every single time, you can only go to the well on that so many times. So you have to wonder, is he going to come out of this again? Is he going to get himself together? Maybe he's playing through something. If Kochekov comes back and Freddie goes on IR, then you know that he was playing through something. Because one of the things that I've always felt like, and I could be totally wrong about this, but one of the things that I've noticed, that it seems like when Freddie's not 100%, like if he's playing through an injury, he has a harder time sealing the post. So maybe it's something that's been a reoccurring aggravation for him. That could be a thing. But, like I said, if Kochekov comes back and he's healthy and Freddie goes on IR, you know that that's a possibility. So there's that to consider. Bussi could just be on a hot streak right now. He could fall off a cliff and go full Jack LaFontaine one game. That could happen. I doubt that. That's a very unlikely outcome, in my opinion, because I like what I'm seeing out of him. There's that. And then Kochekov is, it's just, he's at that pivotal point in his career, but he's been kind of stuck in limbo at this for the last couple of years. You've got no definitive best option. You have 3 options that could be good, 3 options that could be bad. There's nothing that definitively says, okay, this will work. This is not a situation where you get to a fork in the road and you know exactly which way to turn. One way could lead you to treasure at the end of the rainbow with the whole leprechaun from Lucky Charms. The other way, you could drive off the edge of a cliff, and that's that. That's the dilemma here. Talked about that already. Lackey says that Forsberg goal should flat out just not have happened. I agree. That was just a really bad defensive breakdown, just to leave him alone in front of the net right like that. And he just, that was inexcusable. Excuse me 1 second. All right. So we got that there. And Ethan Reed, what's up, buddy? GG's Toronto for the biggest blessing in disguise. Without them scoping and Caden Primo, we don't pivot to Bussi. Yeah, that's working well. And, I'm going to go into a more extensive discussion here about Buss here in a second, like what I see out of his game. Matthew's pulling up a great point here. Bussi will also occasionally throw the old school VH every now and then. He throws shooters off. Yeah, he does. And he doesn't do it much. Bussi throwing the VH is kind of like Spencer Strider before he got injured, before he, blew up his Tommy John. Spencer Strider is a guy who throws 90%. For those of you who are baseball fans, he throws 90% of his pitches are fastballs and sliders. And after he had Tommy John surgery, he couldn't throw with that heat all the time, every single pitch. And he was starting to integrate other pitches in anyway before that happened. But then he started integrating the changeup in a lot more. Before that, he only threw a changeup, I think, 14% of his pitches. That's Bussi with the VH. So that's a good thing to see. You don't want to pull that out all the time, but it really throws shooters off when he does that. Dylan says, my God, Edmonton's horn give you a headache. Yeah, that's one of the most annoying goal horns in the entire league by far. The Calgary one I find very annoying. The Washington one is annoying. The Boston one is classic, so I won't hate on it, but it's annoying because it's tied to Boston. Let's see, who has cool goal horns? That's actually a good discussion. I like Carolina's. Tampa has a cool one. LA's is annoying. San Jose's is cool. Anaheim, I'm 50-50 on theirs. Dallas is, I think Dallas is all right if it's the one I'm thinking of. Toronto's is annoying. I like the Islanders' goal horn actually a whole lot. Don't hate me for this, but I think the Rangers have a cool goal horn. The Devils have a cool goal horn. Seattle, I like theirs. I think theirs is cool. The Canucks actually have one of my favorite ones too. Winnipeg, I like theirs. This is goal horns, not goal songs I'm talking about here, just the horns in isolation. Yeah, it's a lot of good options there. Glad I didn't start Comrie tonight. Yeah, probably. Also happy they had their first power play goal game of the season, now tied with Utah in 27th with a 14.3% conversion. Yeah, if they can get that up to closer to 20 by the time the calendar year ends, I'm a lot happier with that. Get it closer to 20 by the end of the season, have it up to around 22, and it's good. That's the margin of error with a successful power play versus an unsuccessful power play, especially on a team that typically doesn't have to score a lot to win, like the Hurricanes. That power play, it just needs to be, what's the word I'm looking for here? I don't want to say minimal, nominal. It needs to just be nominal. Nominal is 22 to 25%. If it can be better than that, all the better, because people already dread the Hurricanes penalty kill. They already dread trying to play against them 5-on-5 and get their best players in position to score. Goalies, yeah, maybe you face not so many high quality chances, but you face a ton of low quality chances, like to the point where it can wear you out. And over the course of a series, players having to block all those shots and goalies having to make all those saves, you can turn it into a war of attrition, wear them out. Carolina's beat Washington in the playoffs twice that way. Let's see. An interesting stat I've been keeping up with this year is the Hurricanes are 14-0-0 when scoring 4+ goals and 3.82 when scoring 1 to 3 goals. See, that's weird. I think a lot of that has to do with the injuries. 1 second. Sorry, guys. I am really damn thirsty. I think a lot of that has to do with the injuries, because usually the Hurricanes getting a 3-goal lead is a death sentence, especially if they get it early because of how well they defend. I think that this is just, you've had the revolving door of defensemen being out, Slavin being the most notable one. Keys missed some games. Chatty's missed a few games, so on and so forth. And then you go into KK being out. Yeah, he's not like the greatest defensive center by any means, but he's someone who still goes out there and takes up time and space with his frame and lays the body. So there's that. Jordo missed a few games. I think that a lot of it has to do with the injuries, as far as 3-8-2 when scoring 1 to 3 goals. And then they had to be uncharacteristic to win some of those games that they won where they scored 4+. I think that that's kind of why that is the way that is. Wolfpack Crazy, what's up, buddy? Raised by the Canes, believe. I know who you are. I know who you are. It's good to see you, pal. Catherine, what's up? Bussi's game fits well with the Kane style. When their structure cracks, he becomes vulnerable. Yeah, and that's where a lot of what I saw of him tonight was his ability to make the timely saves. And that's what the Canes need the most out of a goalie. So that's actually going to lead me into my next discussion here after I get to this last comment. Dylan says, last 2 games I've been to, Freddie was winning over Van, and Dan Tominski win OT over Penguins. I haven't gotten to see Coochie live yet. I haven't in a while. Not you. What's up, boss? All right, so here's some things that I want to talk about, particularly in regards to Bussi. I know I've already talked about this a little bit. I won't go into too much more detail of it. The ability to be cold for a while. That's when, this is when goalies like Kochekov, because of maybe just the way that his mind works and that he's better when he's busy. Maybe Freddie it might be that his age. I hate to look at it that way, but it could be potentially that. When they're sitting in their crease and they're watching Carolina dominate the offensive zone for minutes at a time, and the most activity they have is either watching the play or maybe playing the puck for the Canes, then that's time where Kochekov's brain is running wild and someone like Anderson is going cold, and for lack of a better term, he's kind of seizing up physically. What the Hurricanes need out of a goalie more than anything is someone who can make timely saves and can do it while kind of being bored, if that makes sense. So basically, if Bussi, as he's shown in situations, can sit there for 4 or 5 minutes without any action whatsoever, and then wait, and then when it's go time, he can flip that switch and go back to like he's been making saves the entire game, he's golden. That's the first biggest thing that you would need out of a Hurricanes goaltender. It appears that he has that. I don't want to say definitively that he has that, but he has shown that somewhere that's in his DNA. Can you find it consistently, though, is the next thing. 2, you need a goalie who's prepared to play the puck a lot. One of the things that I noticed back in the 18-19 season, when Scott Darling got injured and Peter Mrazek was in, I made it to the home opener, and I actually didn't get there until, I want to say it was 8 minutes into the first period when I finally got to my seat. It was way more packed there than I expected it to be. And I get there, and one of the things I immediately noticed about Mrazek, because I was actually walking to my seat when Svechnikov hit the post the second time in that period. And I remember seeing Peter Mrazek playing the puck a lot more than Scott Darling ever did. Like in that one game, I was like, all right, Mrazek actually comes out and plays the puck. And for a team that was already showing they were placing an emphasis on zone entry denial, having a goalie who can play the puck and play it effectively and play it smartly was one of the things that really already started separating Mrazek from Darling. And then he started having more consistent starts. And then that was that. Scott Darling is one of my least favorite people that have ever come to the Hurricanes, just for the record. So Bussi can play the puck really, really well. Third thing that you need is patience, because when a team has Carolina under siege in Carolina's zone, teams know that they're not going to get clean looks on net without working for them. So that means cycling the puck around, slowly working to the interior, activating your guys at the blue line, activating your defense to try and get Carolina off balance with their man-on-man defense, because it has its drawbacks, but it also has its upsides. The biggest upside is keeping teams on the perimeter and creating good shot suppression, not allowing stuff to the interior of the ice in most situations. But when things do get to the interior, a lot of times it can be bad. So Bussi has to be the stopgap between effective man-on-man defense and defensive breakdowns, and he has to kind of be like, it's like Catherine talked about, when the Canes cracks show, he becomes vulnerable. That's where Bussi kind of has to be. This sounds like, what I'm about to say sounds like something Trip Tracy would say. This is where Bussi has to kind of be Flex Seal. He has to be the Flex Seal meme. Water springs out, he just slaps the Flex Seal thing on it, throws a thumbs up and says, for $19.95, you can have a extra bottle of this. And if you call now, we'll include, that's what he has to be in those situations. So fundamentally, technically, very sound goalie. A little bit overexertive on the first save attempt he usually makes, but he usually carries that momentum into the second save attempt when he needs to, as he did tonight. I think tonight is indicative of Bussi having a high-end game. Now, one thing that detractors of the idea of Bussi may say, and it's a valid argument, is that, well, they only played against Nashville. Okay, understandable. Nashville's strengths are all up front, though. Andrew Burnett is a very, very offensively minded coach. And that's not coming from me. That's from me doing research on him and seeing things that he's talked about in what his style of play or what his style of coaching is and what he expects his team to do and everything like that. He's I don't want to say completely antithetical to how Brendan Moore is, but Andrew Burnett definitely places a higher emphasis on scoring. So he's all about quick controlled breakouts, quick transitions, get in the offensive zone, generate chances off the rush. Anything past that is secondary. That's just what he prioritizes. Whereas you have someone like Brendan Moore who prioritizes man-on-man defense, 200-foot game, suffocating forecheck. They're very different. So the thing is, Bussi did face a team that could be indicative of what you need from him, shutting down a team that has a lot of weapons up front. So that's, for the most part, he did that effectively. If he were playing tomorrow, which he will not be, if he were to play tomorrow, then, you look at a team like the San Jose Sharks. The San Jose Sharks are kind of a perfect, I don't want to call them a practice team because, every team in this league is a good team. It's a top six that is really good, really young and really fast, but they're also really inexperienced and they don't have the greatest team built around them. So there's all that to consider. So tonight was actually a pretty good test for Bussi as far as a team that would, as far as having a team out there that you would want to see how your goaltender held up against them when they were playing, when they had their best shifts of the game, their best sequences of the game. You couldn't have asked for a much better experimental partner than the Nashville Predators right now. So there were a lot of good things that came out of that. So that's the whole thing. Sorry, talking a lot makes me thirsty. So let me get to some more of the comments here. Always thank your bus driver. That's going to be a t-shirt. I'm going to get AC on that. All right. Lewis the Bassman, what's up, buddy? Some are putting out the narrative that Freddie is trash now, a false narrative, but some fans seem to describe, I still believe in the guy. I will admit the few games this year were wonky. Trash? No. I don't want to call him that because, he's been through stretches like this before where he was having a hard time. I'm a little bit annoyed with how he's playing too. But I'm not ready to just totally throw the guy away myself. But it's also like, let's say Bussi didn't play well, or if he played moderately well, but not enough to cause a discussion. That's one thing. But he has, in fact, created the need for a discussion. Like, you legitimately have to talk about how far apart is he from your other two goalies in terms of capability. And it's a lot closer than you would ever imagine a waiver acquisition would be. Waiver claims do not normally create this kind of discussion. They're kind of something you get to add organizational depth, to fill a need, and to stopgap you until somebody comes back from an injury, normally stuff like that. Normally, you don't claim somebody off of waivers and think that it could potentially be season-altering in a good way. You hope for that, but it rarely happens. This is one of those cases where it might be happening. I don't want to definitively say it is happening, but it might be. So let's see. Don't stop commenting so fast. I'm trying to click on shit. Like he says, the team has seemingly had a different style of play when you compare 32 and 31 in net. That was something I was going to get to. I do personally believe that there is a noticeable difference with how the team plays with Bussi and net. Because when a team like the Hurricanes is confident in their goaltender, that is a lot more often that they're stepping up aggressively in the neutral zone to shut down transition. More often they're aggressively stepping up at the blue line to deny entry. More often that they're pinching, the defensemen in particular are pinching to try and keep the play at the other end of the ice when they are down there, because they know if there's a breakdown, they've, got maybe one defenseman back in addition to their goaltender to help out with them, and you can do all those things. When your defense is that good and your goaltending is that good, you have that confidence, that zero hesitancy mindset where you can do those things. And it does seem that they do have that, a little bit less hesitancy and a lot more confidence right now when Bussi's in net. it does look that way. I'm not definitively saying that is or isn't a factor, but on the surface level, to me, at face value, it does appear that way. Yes, especially in the last few games when they've had to chase immediately off the jump. Yeah, and the Hurricanes are not a good chasing team. They're not. Carolina is one of those teams that is built to play with the lead. So games start 0-0, and then Carolina, if they dictate when it goes to 1-0, 2-0, 3-0, 3-2, 3-1, whatever lead you want to throw in there, then typically they're fine. But they're not built to chase a game. They're not built to, as the saying goes, outscore their problems. They can on occasion, but I would not rely on this team to outscore its problems in games that matter, i.e. playoffs. So that definitely could be a factor. Yes, I absolutely agree. Lewis says, I get that. I'm just not very reactionary about these things. Here's hoping he can get it back fully. Yeah, I do my best to not be reactionary about a lot of stuff myself. So I very much understand that sentiment. Now, I was making the joke about that had Jimmy from South Park on it with the whole chit China thing. That's just me goofing around. I don't actually want Freddie Smith to China. When I don't like a player, trust me, I make that abundantly clear. Like I make that clear. I still like Freddie. And the idea of him doing everything that he's done for the Hurricanes and Carolina not winning a cup or winning a cup without him it's not much less painful than the idea of Carolina winning a cup again without Rod. Like, just to be perfectly honest, like Freddie helped take this team to the next level. He got out goalied in 22-23 by one of like 4 or 5 people walking the face of the earth that could out goalie him. Like, Sergei Bobrovsky is one of the few people who were definitively better than him at the time in the Eastern Conference. That's it. Out of all the people who could potentially end up in that position to be a bigger net positive between the pipes than Freddie Anderson, he drew one of the short straws. If it wasn't for him, 22-23 doesn't go as well as it did, especially considering Svechnikov, Kasha, and Pacioretty were all out, and Teravainen missed the first 2 rounds because I think it was Brock Nelson slashed him and broke his hand. We saw the defense let loose a lot in the third, and in some Anderson games on some goals, it feels like the D has been on the week. I did not like how the defense played a lot of the third period. Not at all. About 6 or 7 minutes of it, predominantly the time frame in which Nashville scored their 3 goals, they were awful. They took their foot off the gas. That's unacceptable. You cannot, play a game that lasts 60 minutes and only play for 53 of it and always win. Tonight you were able to because you got ahead of it and you temporarily cured your power play problems. Let's see how long that lasts. But I'm not relying on the Hurricanes to outscore their problems. I'm really not. They got to get it together in other ways. What's up, Wizard? The problem is if PK comes back and pick up where he was, decisions will have to be made. Yeah. At this point, somebody has to fall off. Or somebody has to fall off drastically. And I don't think anybody wants out of the 3 goalies. But someone's going to be speaking Chinese here soon. That's I don't envy the position Tulsky is in, because it could be you have 3 options. You have to pick 2, and it could be catastrophic failure or amazing success. And there's not really much of a gray area there. That's the whole thing with it. I'm confident he'll make the right decision. He pretty much always does, minus the Rantanen thing, but he got fucked over in that situation. I'm not going to pretend for a second that he didn't. We'll see. I'm very curious to see how this plays out. Like he says, Freddie definitely due for a hot stretch. Yeah, he's done this before where he's played like shit for a while, and then he just out of nowhere gets it together. So like I'm hoping that he can do it again. But with him being 36 years old already, you can only go to the well on that so many times. But 31-52 of that tandem it's been solid, but it's not where it needs to be just yet, or not where it needs to be anymore. Maybe you could say either way, not where it needs to be at the moment. Whether that's something that's going to, return to form or not, I don't know. It's just, this is going to be interesting to see how this plays out, especially with Slavin getting close to coming back. Grayson, what's up, buddy? Good game tonight, man. I'm maybe busy tomorrow in the morning checking and say hi, man. Hope you're doing well, pal. Ethan says Freddie is showing us why the goaltending needs to be addressed soon. Teams like Edmonton and Montreal are showing us why we re-signed Freddie. Things could be worse. Yeah, no, things absolutely could be worse. The Hurricanes have been in worse positions than this with goaltending. Remember last, what was it? November, December, somewhere like that, where the goaltending rotation was Spencer Martin and Yaniv Peretz. Yeah, things can definitely be worse. You're absolutely right about that. There have been worse times. I so forgot about the slash turbo G's. That was though. Yeah, if I remember correctly, it was Brock Nelson just straight up took the axe to him because he's a talentless hack. I won't say that. He's actually a very good hockey player, but when he was on the Islanders, I did not like him. Love Freddie, but maybe you could coax Edmonton with a goalie who has shown life in the playoffs. Yeah, and I think that they would definitively see they would definitely see Freddie as a definitive upgrade. So there's that possibility as well. After seeing them in detail, did anyone from Nashville interest you? Their season has been rough, and they might be moving on from some big pieces. So the only reason I am against potentially acquiring Saros is his contract. And it's not even the amount of money, it's the amount of term. He's 30 years old and has 8 years of term left on that. I'm not touching that personally. If it was 4-5 years, I'd say to try to make a move to get Saros. No defensemen, don't need any of those. Stamkos maybe for a center. But honestly, I don't know how well he would fit 5-on-5 doing the defensive side of things at this point in his career. Power play, he could definitely help out, but I think that that's something that can still be solved internally, especially after what we saw tonight. Philip Forsberg, if we wanted a winger for the Canes, could be a very like that could be like a instant propel you to the top of cup contenders type of move if you acquired him. The only thing is, it's like you got to figure out how do you rearrange stuff after that as far as where you're going to put everybody. Because you've already got kind of an abundance of right shot wingers, but the priority is to get a center. If you can't get to center, then improve the forward group in other ways, and then at that point, you'd have to look at wingers. So I'd rather get a center who's not as big of an impact player as Forsberg to not upset the lineup the way that it is and to fill a need. But if Forsberg could also be acquired in addition to that, that's something you really got to think about doing. So Forsberg would be one guy I'd like to get from there if that were possible. Honestly, nobody else really. There's nobody else there that I really think that Carolina needs to just outright go get, and that's the only player I'd want there, and he's not high on my priority list. Not because of lack of skill. He's an incredibly good player. It's mostly because there's just nowhere to put him right now. And I don't want to trade someone like Blake or Stankoven for someone like him, considering they're so young and they're on such good contracts. Right now, I would say my other target from there would be, and this would be a stopgap 2C, Ryan O'Reilly would be another good option. I think he'd be a good fit. He's a little bit slower now, but defensive side of the game, excellent at Selke. Good in faceoffs. Really, his defensive positioning is really responsible when he backtracks in the neutral zone, when he's backchecking and everything like that. Really good at angling guys off. Not a very physical guy, but he doesn't need to be. He's good at absorbing contact, though. He's got the frame for it. There's him. I would have to say that he would fill a bigger need, even though Forsberg is a better player. Who I'm looking at the most right now is, and I'm going to take a really good look at him when he gets back from injury, is probably Boone Jenner from Columbus. Like, if you want a stopgap 2C, Boone Jenner, imagine a version of Jordan Staal who scores more. That's essentially what he is. So then if you acquire him, you can bump Stankoven down, and depending on, how you slot KK in, or even if he gets traded or whatever, or however it all goes down, depending on who your players are after that, you can move Stankoven back to the wing, slot Jenner in with, say, Blake and Ehlers, or Blake and Svechnikov, however you want to do it. Either way, the second line guy. And then Stankoven, if you want to keep him at center, he can play with Robinson and Hall, and he gets a little bit better matchups to kind of develop that side of his game and see if you can still get that, or you can move Stankoven back to the wing and put him with Stahl and Martinook, for example. There's a bunch of different options there. But, the thing is, it's like, as far as second line centers go, the internal hire there is not going to work out at least as quickly as the team needs it to before the end of the season, I'm afraid. They said the same things about Aho though, and that ended up working out fine. Natchez was someone I advocated to play center. I turned out being totally wrong about that. Stankoven's already showing more promise at this point than Natchez ever did playing center. I will admit that. I was totally wrong about Natchez at center. So you could put him in a position where he could get better matchups, kind of develop that side of his game a little bit more. Or you can put him back on the wing. You can build a new line that has KK Stankoven and Robinson or Hall, something like that. Like there's a bunch of different options there. So it just kind of depends. If they wanted to go for a big fish, I hate to say this name, and the only reason I'm talking about it because me and some of the guys in my group chat were talking about it. If Seattle would make it would take a haul for this to happen. If Seattle would maybe consider giving up Shane Wright, that's someone else you could look at. Elias Pettersson, I talked about him a lot the other day. Why I'm kind of just suspending that discussion because I don't know what's going on in his personal life with the unfortunate loss that he suffered recently. So I'm not even going to touch that right now. That's about all I can think of off the top of my head at the moment. Things can change though. You know, it's like you get later in the season, teams start falling out of the playoff picture. Like I know a lot of people talked about Tage Thompson. A lot of people talked about Alex Tuck. And those are guys I've talked about until I'm blue in the face. And honestly, I just don't think that they're very realistic options at the moment. But someone like Boone Jenner to come off of the Columbus Blue Jackets, be a stopgap guy, or someone like Ryan O'Reilly, those are two very realistic options. I just have to decide which one I'd want more of the two. Right now, that's a toss-up. If I had to pick, like off the top of my head, I'd say Boone Jenner. But I want to do a whole lot of research and watch a whole lot of video of them before I decide on which one of those I would want. Caleb, what's up, bro? With the emergence of Nystrom waiver eligible and how confident Rod is with him, any chance we put Riley on waivers when Slavin is back to put the goalie decision off a little longer? Is Nystrom waiver eligible now? I didn't know he was. Thought he wasn't yet. Two seasons or 50 NHL games played. Waiver status exempt. Nystrom is exempt from waivers. So we don't have to worry about that. Yeah, Nystrom is still waiver exempt. I just looked it up on Puckpedia. Okay, I'm back now. I guess it cut out for a second, but no, waiver. Nystrom is waivers exempt. I just looked it up on Puckpedia because that's what I was confident he was waiver exempt, and he is. So you don't have to worry about that. You can send him back down. He doesn't have to clear because he would have to hit the 50 games played mark. That's not a problem. He's nowhere near that. He's only got 20, so or 21 now, I believe it would be after tonight. Is this thing breaking again? Okay, there we go. All right, got it back now. All right, let me go back here. But yeah, Riley would go on waivers if it were between the two of them. I think Riley would go on waivers between Nystrom and Riley if that were the scenario, because one, Nystrom's a right-handed defenseman. Carolina's a little bit short on those right now. And two, Nystrom is a guy you're probably keeping long term. Riley has played well enough to where he's going to play himself into a decent contract, I think. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's moved at the deadline. That just potentially. But considering what happened in the playoffs last year, I would prefer to hold on to Riley just in case. Like he says, you just gave me a flashback to that Florida back-to-back. Definitely could always be worse. Yeah, that weekend was awful. God, RR massacred us on the dot. Makes you think. Yeah, that's a good point. Who'd it be at center then? If you had your druthers that is available throughout the league, that is. If I could pick anybody in the league, ooh, that's available. Out of the potentially available ones, like if I could overpay to make something happen and maybe pry somebody out of somewhere and because I'd want a long-term second line center so we don't have to worry about it for a while. That's a tough one off the top of my head. If I was going to overpay to get somebody, I think maybe I'd go for Shane Wright. I think that'd be your most realistic option to get a long-term second line center. Off the top of my head, I'd have to really think about it. I've speculated on. Oh, actually, I'm going to say who I've been saying the entire time: Robert Thomas, because I think Carolina, if you get him to waive his no trade clause, you could pry him out of St. Louis. Maybe that'd be my number one choice, Robert Thomas by far. I knew I was forgetting somebody, but Robert Thomas would be my number one choice. You wouldn't have to teach him much. He'd fit in relatively quick. He's fast. He's not the most physical guy, but he's good at absorbing contact. He's good at scoring greasy goals, but he's also got a cannon of a shot, great defensively. That'd be my number one choice by far, Robert Thomas. Stankoven is just 3 for 13 on the dot. While the line played great tonight, I'd assume that the run at center is running out of steam. Yeah. Aho was also developing in a rebuild. Stank doesn't have that luxury. Yeah, that's the other thing. And plus, Aho had 2 years of NHL experience under his belt, plus his 1 year playing professionally in Finland. And he played wing that entire time. But Aho's just a special player in his ability to adapt to things. He's got a little bit extra size too, which helps him out. Typo meant not. Okay. Cavery, what's up, buddy? Been saying let's go get RR. Stanky just staying center move, bring him back to wing. Yeah, and he'll be effective there in his top 3 stopgap centers. I would say Jenner, Ryan O'Reilly. Let's see, a third stopgap center. Who would be my third stopgap choice? Because we've talked about so many of these names, they're starting to get kind of confuzzled now in my brain. I can't think of a third one off the top of my head as far as just stopgap guys. I guess maybe you could say Stamkos for a third one, but I'd prefer, if possible, avoid the stopgap route and just solve that problem now so you don't have to worry about solving it again in 2 to 3 years. Unless you think Ivan Rabion's going to turn into something, which he very well could, but you can't bank on that totally happening. All right. Let's see here. What else was I going to look at? Jesus Christ, I got like 26 notifications on X. All right, guys. I think that's going to be it for me tonight, though. I will try to do both shows tomorrow for the 5 o'clock game. I got some stuff I got to get up and take care of in the morning. And then I should be able to do shows for most of the games coming up between now and about the middle of January. That shouldn't be a problem, as long as I'm not at the shop working. Thank you very much for joining me. I appreciate all the support. We will talk a lot more about all this I'm going to do some more research and everything like that. I'm not going to say that I am convinced that a move is imminent, but I think that it's more likely to happen now than it has been in the past. Carolina has the assets. Additionally, they have too many assets. They have a bunch of guys who want to have a clear path to maybe make it to the NHL. And even their top prospect right now, Bradley Nadeau, doesn't really have a clear path to get there. So that's the whole thing about it. So we'll see. But I think that eventually this is going to hit critical mass and Carolina's going to pull the trigger on something. So we'll just have to wait and see what that is. I don't think that you see the exact same team now go to the playoffs. I really don't. But thank you very much for joining me. It has been fun. Good win tonight. I will see you guys tomorrow night.